Good evening, everybody. I'm a member of both of these groups, so I'm actually a bit nervous talking to you all, because if I don't do a good job for you, then I'm going to have to not come back again, and I quite enjoy coming to these meetings. What I want to talk about is a shift in mindset for IT project success, and just to tee up where we're going to be going with what I'm talking about, is there are essentially three topics I'm going to talk about, which is psychology, leadership and value, which together make up, I believe, a different mindset from the mantra of on time and on budget that we hear so often. And when I talked to my wife about doing this presentation, she said, "What are you going to talk about?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to talk about a book that I just had published by Gower in September." And I said, "Well, there are eight chapters. There are 5 reasons why projects often go wrong. There are 5 top frustrations of project sponsors. I've got 8 recommendations of practical things people need to do overall." And she said, "It's just far too much." She said, "You want something like 1 to 3 points, absolutely maximum." So my 3 points are psychology, leadership and value. And what I want to do is to give viewers, effectively my customers, something that when you go back into the workplace tomorrow, that you've got 3 things that you can say when you look at think about when you look at your project, that makes you look at your project in a slightly different way to the way that you looked at it today. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we go through. And at the end, I've got 3 practical things that I think that everybody could do tomorrow. Anybody that's involved in a project can do tomorrow. When I come to these meetings, which I do often, people often ask about, can I see a copy of the slides and stuff like that, and they're scribbling notes furiously. So I wanted to show you this. So this is on my website. So my website is called doubleloopconsulting.com. This presentation is embedded in that website. It's called Mindset, and there are going to be a number of topics that I'm going to talk through. And because I'm a bit of a waffler, I'm probably not going to get through all of the material. So there's stuff here that you might want to pick up separately, stuff that I refer to, and you can pick that up after the meeting if you're interested in it. So that's the preamble. So what's the problem? Looking around the room and the profile of ages, because so like Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is to acknowledge the problem, right? So let me ask a question. In what looks like a relatively mature audience, if you don't mind me saying, I speak as somebody relatively mature myself, how often do you think IT projects, by the way, by IT projects I mean any sort of project which is dependent on IT change to achieve its business benefits or its business outcome. So that's what I mean by an IT project. When I say an IT project, people often look at me pityingly and say, "Of course, Gary, you realise there's no such thing as an IT project." Well, yeah, I do realise that, but that's what I mean by an IT project. So what proportion of IT projects deliver what they said they would on time and on budget? Anybody?
5%.
5%?
Not enough.
Not enough. Do we agree it's a problem?
Depends on the size.
It does depend on the size, absolutely it does. I'm going to use one example through this, not to bash it particularly, but a recent one, which is the Universal Credit Programme. Is there anybody working on Universal Credit here? You don't want to say?
No, we're not. We're not unlucky enough for that.
The other thing, sorry, I forgot to ask as well, is there anybody that's visually impaired? It's a serious question, because I'll read some stuff out rather than show it if they are. Okay, nobody's saying. So so there's a problem. So why is there such a problem? Well, let's start with one of the reasons that there's a problem. If I asked you how long it would take to walk to Charing Cross Station, did anybody come from Charing Cross tonight? Yeah, how long did it take?
3 minutes.
3 minutes? Done it before? Loads of times. So if you've done something loads of times before, you can estimate quite accurately. But if you've never done it before, you've got no way of estimating it. The best you can do is to guess. So if I said to you, for example, how long would it take you to walk from London to Paris? If you've not done it, you wouldn't know. Does anybody want to have a guess?
Wait for the bridge first.
Wait for the bridge. Well, there are quite a lot of things to factor in, like when do the ferries go? Are you going to walk for 24 hours? Can you go through the night? It's not an easy task because you've not done it before. Now, that's much easier than estimating an IT project, because in this, at least you can have some sort of guess how quickly you're going to go, and you've got a clear picture of the destination. Neither of those hold true for most IT projects. Now, if I then said, well, actually, when you get to Paris, I then want you to walk to Rome. Now, Rome's a bit more of a challenge, and I also want you to pick a couple of other people out of the audience, and you're going to take them and their families as well, so you're going to do it as a team. That's actually quite a complicated problem to solve, actually. I mean, it goes over the Alps. It's not flat. Now, if you haven't done it before, then it's difficult to estimate how long it's going to take. But once again, we know what Rome looks like. We can go on Google Maps Street View and have a look if we haven't been there. And we can make some sort of estimate of speed. But it's a complex task. So the point I'm trying to make about IT projects analogous to this is they're much more difficult, because you can't estimate how long something's going to take unless you've done it before. The only thing you can do is guess. But as the gentleman said here, the bigger the project, the less accurate you're likely to be. So most of us could guess how long it's going to take to walk to Charing Cross Station because it's quite close. So I wanted to use a thread throughout this of the Universal Credit Programme, and Ian Duncan Smith took to the airwaves back in September when the National Audit Office produced a report, and he said this is not another IT disaster, he said.
It's heading that way.
Pardon?
I think it's heading that way.
Well, Ian Duncan Smith was speaking as a man who originally had, I've got the numbers here because I thought I might forget them, that the budget to go to 2005 was 396 million. They'd spent 303 million, which is 3/4 of the development budget. Most of that went on software development, and they just increased it by 60% to 637 million. And they'd also focused on doing what they call a pathfinder. One of the links that I've got on the website is a link to the National Audit Office report, and I really encourage you to go and look at it, because for any project that you may care to think of, it's a really good list of the sort of stuff that could go wrong. And one of the reasons for picking Universal Credit is not just because it's topical, because a lot of us, I include myself in this, would go, well, those bloody idiots, they don't know what they're doing. If that wouldn't happen if I was in charge. Most of this money has been spent with Accenture and IBM. And whatever you may think about those companies, they don't hire idiots. Nor do the civil service hire idiots into senior positions to do their projects. You know, it's just so huge and difficult. Now, I think there are things they could have done differently, but I think just need to be cautious when we look at these things and say, well, of course, there's just a bunch of clowns. But I'll come back to that when I talk about psychology. I'm going to pick out some bits of this as we go through, and I've picked out some key words. This is what the National Audit Office said. I will labour it and read it out. The department has delayed rolling out universal credit to claimants, so it's been delayed. It had weak control of the programme, been unable to assess the value. Value is a key topic this evening. Weak programme management, over-optimistic, lack of openness. I'll come back to most of those as we go through. So my argument is that I've been managing programs for something like 20 years, and the way that we hit on time and on budget is we generally cut the scope. That's what we do. Those of us that have been around for a long time, we know that, because how does it come in on time and on budget? Well, I don't know if you know Douglas Hofstadter, who was a computer scientist. He formulated Hofstadter's law. I don't know if everybody knows it. Hofstadter's law says any complex task like an IT project will take longer than you expect, even when Hofstadter's law is taken into account. Estimating complex things is very difficult. So I'm arguing that there are three lenses made up of psychology, leadership and value. I particularly want to focus on value, but I want to briefly go through 2 points of psychology and to go through some things of leadership, because value sits within the context of leadership. It does not sit on its own. And what I think is that there is an overlap between these three lenses. So if we look at our projects through these three lenses, we end up with a slightly different mindset in terms of how we go about our projects. Has anybody ever done the Euro Millions? Can you put your hand up? Okay. Has anybody ever done the Lotto? Okay. Bunch of rational people. Right.
Premium ones, right?
I don't know the odds on that, but I know what the odds are. I know that the odds of being struck by lightning are 100 times more likely than winning the Euro Millions. We've got an innate optimism bias. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning. I mean, one of the reasons that projects fail so often is we look at all the other projects, we look at the statistics that are produced, and we see that only 30% of projects, or 40% if you look at the BCS survey numbers, come in on time and on budget, and we estimate how long ours are going to take, and we go, yeah, but we're smarter than those clowns. We're better than they are. Can all the drivers put their hands up, please? Right. Can you keep them up? Sorry. So they're all the drivers. Can you put your hand down if you think you're a better than average driver? Okay. All right, put your hands down. Could parents put their hands up? Can you put your hand down if you think you're a better than average parent? Interesting.
Yeah.
So you think you're less than average parents? Is that right? Average parents. We tend things that are important to us. We tend to think that we're better than other people. Most of us do tend to believe you're an atypical group. You've messed me up now. Most people believe they're better than average drivers. They believe that they're better than average parents. Universal credit. I'm not knocking Ian Duncan Smith particularly, because I don't know what his responsibility is in this, and I'll come back to something under the Labour government later on just to even the score. But over-optimistic timescales. We're always over-optimistic about the timescales. There's something in psychology called the planning fallacy. We tend to go for something that is close to the best case scenario. This is so the first bit of psychology I want you to remember is optimism bias. And when you're back in the workplace, remember optimism bias. Are we being too optimistic? This is another. Everything in psychology is called a bias, by the way. They call everything biases.
You know how many there are?
How many there are? Huge number.
About 95.
Okay, so here's another one. So sorry, I need to manually click on to the next slide. The point of that simply is the Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman tells us that we're jumping to conclusion machines. We look for patterns, we value a story over the facts, we make a story up in flight, we don't wait till we've got all the facts in, and once we've got a story in our heads, we look for confirming evidence. So optimism bias and jumping to conclusion machines, confirmation bias is one of those, are two things we really need to be careful in projects. Liz Taylor, Richard Burton, if you don't recognise them, they got married twice. Liz Taylor got married 8 times. That's optimism bias, if ever I heard it. It's really interesting that friends and family are better predictors of how successful a relationship is going to be than we are ourselves. So when it comes down to jumping to conclusions, when it comes down to optimism bias, the only real way of tackling that is to get an external view. And if we've got a big project, then we need to look at the things that we can do are get external views within the company, external views from analogous industries and things like that. So I'm going to rattle on quite quickly, talk about leadership. Does anybody know what that is?
Is that the shuttle?
It is the shuttle. Do you know what happened?
The rubber rings, the temperature was so low that the rubber rings fragmented and therefore fuel linked to explode, and Feynman was on the panel.
Does anybody know what the root cause was?
Yes, it was politics. Part of the politics that said if you want money to build the shuttle, then you have to diversify the expenditure right in the United States.
Terry, thank you. Let's see what the chief engineer that built the rocket boosters said.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
It looked like a perfect launch, but 73 seconds into the flight, the Challenger space shuttle was to suffer a devastating explosion, killing all 7 astronauts.
Why did you say we had, I think we're here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. Flight 5, okay. RSO reports vehicle exploded. Copy.
If I were to go through the list of the astronauts that are on board, I probably would crack my voice and tears would form again. And yeah, I do get very emotional because of the fact that human lives were lost needlessly. Because I never considered it an accident, and I will never consider it an accident. It was predetermined what would happen, and people just did not listen.
So that guy is called Roger Beaujolais. It's a great name. And the point that on the links I showed you before, I've put the full video of the space shuttle, of that documentary from the BBC, and if you want to understand about people dynamics and bullying in a very large project where the risk is people's lives, then I really recommend the video to you. I'm only going to leave it up for a week because otherwise the copyright police come after me, but if you go to the link, it's there. I really recommend it. But so leadership, people just did not listen. That's one of the key actions of leadership, is to listen. On the Universal Credit Programme, it talked about weak management and lack of openness. People didn't want to hear bad news. Leaders are good listeners. It's a key action of... I like this quote. I don't know if you get Jean-Paul Sartre quoted very often at BCS, but I thought I would do it. Jean-Paul Sartre, that's him, said that a man is the sum of his actions. I get nervous, and I put this up because I get nervous talking about leadership, because there's a bit of fetishization of leaders and leadership. But leadership is about what we do, not about what we say. It's not about charisma, it's about what we do. And one of the things that, I'm speeding up a bit now because I'm conscious of the time. I produced this book which in September, which I'll mention at the end. And the conclusion I came to from looking at the research of why projects go wrong is that one of the number one causes of failure is poor business leadership. Too often, business leaders don't step up to the plate. They see the IT bus come along with its processes and procedures, and they go from being a driver to being a passenger. They don't behave like they do purchasing any other asset for their business. So, given this is the BCS, if you're working on the IT side of things, this is really bad news. Because if you don't have a business leader who's engaged, you're going to have a very, very tough time getting value from your project. There are some strategies that one can take, but business leadership is just so important to the success of projects, and survey after survey shows that. So a couple of things that business leaders can do. One is defining the right problem. It's amazing how badly this is still done. Albert Einstein, you might know the quotation. The quotation goes, if I had 60 minutes to save the planet, I'd spend 55 defining the problem and 5 defining the solution. Defining the right problem is absolutely key. I was once called into a project, this was quite a while back, and it was a project that was going to be late, and it was scanning standing orders. Do you remember standing orders? We still have standing orders, don't we? They were scanning standing orders, and they wanted me to help them get the project back on track, because surprise, surprise, it was going to be late. So I asked I didn't get the job, by the way. I asked, because I asked some awkward questions, like, why are we scanning the standing orders? And I was told that we were scanning the standing orders to save the person on the phone having to go to the file and get it out. So I said, well, why do they need to go to the file and get it out? And they said, well, because quite often the customers fill in the standing order incorrectly, and when they call in, we want the agent to have it there so that they can tell the customer that they've made a mistake. I said, whoa, hang on. So this project is so we can have an argument with a customer about them having made a mistake. Now, if the customer's got an intention that it was 45 quid a month rather than 50 quid, wouldn't it be easier just to apologise to the customer and say, I'm really terribly sorry, we'll correct that for you. So the defining the right problem is absolutely key, and it's still done very, very badly. I'm sure most people know about the 5 whys. If you don't know about the 5 whys, we'll pick it up in the questions and answers later. Absolutely critical, creating a shared vision. Now, vision is another word like leadership, which I think is massively overused. So let me tell you what I mean by shared vision. What I mean by a shared vision is something which engages the senses, a rich picture of the world, preferably a moving picture that includes sound, vision, emotions. And there are some ways you can do this. One of the things I like to do with clients is that we'll draw a movie poster of the project. What are the headlines? What are the key things people are saying about it? Some people like to say we'll do a box of what the outside product is. What's it going to say about the box? Some people do a TV advert. But these things can be brought to life in ways that make them live and real. And actually, very big client once saw them do a TV ad for a project before the project started. And somebody I know who works at Amazon told me that before they start a project, Amazon writes the press release. Does anybody work for Amazon that can endorse that? But they write the press release of what the project's about. It's a relatively pithy thing, but it's a description of the outcome. And that's kind of predicated on my view that we start with a problem, need or mission. I'm not going to make a differentiation between them. We start with a problem, need or mission, and we start to go through how. And as we go back up, we go why. So as we go from problem, need or mission, a vision has got a bit of solution in it. And eventually we get to a bit more solution. On the iPhone, Steve Jobs said that he wanted to produce the first phone that people would love. A phone that would allow people to carry the internet in their pockets. And that's quite clever because he's already decided it's going to be a phone. If you remember, Google tried to do something that was different from email, Google Wave. Do you remember Google Wave? So you can go up a high. He could have said, produce something that allows people to communicate very easily. But in fact, making it a phone was a constraint, in effect. It had already gone some distance into solution. And it's really interesting. Who, apart from Steve Jobs, could use the word love and get away with it in relation to a product? But we'll come back onto that when we come to value, if I get time to do it. So I'm going to keep going quickly. So apologies for talking a bit. Yeah, so the other thing about leadership is that the job's not done when the ship sets sail. So defining the problem well and setting a clear vision. And a clear vision for me is what I would describe as the true north of the project. So no matter where you are in the project, you don't have to read through telephone directories of things called requirements or design. You know what the project is about from the vision. The vision guides the generation of the solutions. The vision guides the action of the people on the project. The vision should be good enough that people on the project go, do you know what, this is not consistent with the vision. Even if they're Beardy Bob in the corner that's always moaning, Beardy Bob in the corner that's always moaning may have a point. He's not here. He was going to come, but he's not here. Anyway, the job's not done when the ship sets out. This is what often happens, even when people do a good vision and do a good problem definition, they push the boat out and they go, 6 weeks, that should arrive in New York then. I'll check up on it then. Again, Steve Jobs, I'm not a huge fan of Steve Jobs, but there is a lot to learn. That he was intimately involved in projects once they were off and running. He was a true leader in that respect. This is just last week. This was the Public Accounts Committee on Public Accounts Committee on Universal Credit again. And the bits I wanted to pick out were that he read: failure to monitor and challenge progress regularly. Failure to intervene promptly when problems arose. It's a $2.4 billion project. What are they thinking? They've just set off the ship and let it go. I don't know who, by the way, again, I'm not blaming the minister or a civil service or anything. Don't have intimate knowledge. All I know is from reading the National Audit report and reading the Public Accounts Committee report. Leadership is all the way through the project. So finally on to value. Which is what we advertised. Vic is going to talk about value. Vic is going to talk about benefits. structuring benefits and monitoring benefits. But I wanted to talk a little bit about value first. Universal credit. This is the last time I'm going to mention universal credit. Unable to assess the value of systems spent over 300 million to develop. Don't know what the value is. To even things out, right, under the Labour government, Public Accounts Committee said the department is unable to show what has been achieved for 2.7 billion. How did they not notice? When did somebody get nervous? Was it after the first billion? But these things are true of our projects as well on a smaller scale. So this is a bit of a stroll down Schadenfreude Strasse, but we shouldn't be complacent because you find the same things in these as in all of our projects. And it said in the report, 2/3 of benefits unrealised. So what's the solution? What's the alternative to all this mayhem? Well, good leadership is really, really important. Paying attention to psychology is really, really important. Do you know this bloke? Recognise this bloke? He's a very evil man. His name is Kevin McLeod. Thank you, whoever said grand designs. So what typically happens in grand designs is a happy-looking couple are standing in front of the building site, something like this, and they say, we're going to renovate this barn, this Tudor barn, and we're going to turn it into an 8-bedroom family home, and we're going to be in by Christmas. That's what generally happens. Pretty much the same thing. If you've seen one, you've seen most of them. And what happens is, fast forward about halfway through, 3/4 way through the programme, it's always the same. They're standing knee-deep in snow, there's a building site behind, and they've run out of money. It's a great project management programme, Grand Designs. I absolutely love it. But what's the alternative to that? So let's go back. So the alternative to that, I would say, to use this analogy, is that you say to your builder, well, what I want to do is I'm living on the site in a caravan, right? If you've ever seen this programme, they're often in a caravan by the side. It's not very nice. So I'd say, well, the first thing I want you to do is to build me a toilet. Because it's really got high value for me, and I can use that. And then the next thing I want you to build for me is I want you to build a bathroom. And then I want you to build a kitchen. And then I want you to build a bedroom. And then another bedroom. And another bedroom. And the builder will say, that's going to be so expensive. That's going to be so difficult to do. And I would say, well, I'll find a creative builder that can do it. Because if I run out of money at Christmas, at least I'll have a 4-bedroom home with a roof on it, rather than an 8-bedroom home without a roof. So that's what I mean by value delivery. So going to the toilet, sorry to be crude about it, but going to the toilet, if you live in a caravan, you will know, has a particular type of value. Now, if one is going to go in for regular value delivery, then one needs to design with delivery in mind. So there's no point designing a sofa that looks like that and going, I've designed a beautiful sofa, how are we going to flat pack it? IKEA designs its products with flat packing in mind. So if and I would argue that it is, but regular value delivery is the answer, then we need to design our systems such that they can be delivered in that way. What is value? So value is, for me, is benefit divided by cost. More generally, rather than cost, it's usually cost for us, but it could be resource consumed more generally. So if you had a choice between 2 projects, and there's only one person that knows this particular system, this happens a lot in mature organisations, then the value might be determined by the availability of that person. So it's not always cost, because the cost of that person can be the same to the two projects. So that's what I mean by value. And the reason I like value rather than benefit is that because the way our brains are wired is that we understand the concept of value as a single thing. We know what it's like to say, is this good value or not? And our brains deal with cost and benefit at the same time. What we often do in projects is, system gets designed and then we figure out what benefits flow from it. I think it's a different mindset when you go in and think about value. Vic, I'm doing my best, I will get there, I'm nearly there, honestly. Which of these is most valuable? If your benefit is the ability to tell the time, then the seconder is more valuable because it's a much lower cost. If you're a rich Russian oligarch, any rich Russian oligarchs in? If you're a rich Russian oligarch, the cost is negligible. You notice the cost of a Rolex. So value is very much in the eye of the beholder. Here's another example. This is what porters in Nepal eat every day. I know because I've just come back from there. It's called dal bat. This is a main course at the Fat Duck. What's the highest value? Well, if you're a porter in Nepal, I think you'd be pretty cheesed off if you turn up after carrying 3 rucksacks at a time. If you've ever seen it, it's absolutely extraordinary. And they offered you that. If you turned up at the Fat Duck and got that, I think you're not going to be too impressed either. So value is contingent on who the person is and the context. So when we think about all of our stakeholders, we need to think about value. Now, this is a video from Apple, and I'm not going to get enough time to show it. But in that video, they say, the first question we ask is, what do we want people to feel? And if you've ever listened to Johnny Ive, otherwise known as Sir Jonathan Ive, who is the design head of Apple, that's how they really think about it. They really think about how people are going to feel. Now, you go, oh well, yeah, that's Apple. They can do that. You think about it. It's a laptop. People love them. They queue around the block for them. iPhones, it was a commodity. So another aspect of value is emotion. If you're homeless, then value to you might be somewhere to sleep. It might be safety. So people's perception of value varies depending on the context and who they are. And we have to take that into account. There's one particular, I'm nearly finished, one particular type of value that I want to commend to you. And that's validated business case assumptions. It's a particular type of value. Most projects that have got a financial case have got a couple of cells in a spreadsheet somewhere upon which the overall business case is dependent. Now, we can structure our projects such that we say to ourselves, okay, before we start this project, there are a couple of assumptions here that this project is dependent upon. How are we going to validate them as early and as cheaply in our project as is humanly possible? And there are always ways of doing that. Now, if we've got more time at the end, I'm happy to give some examples, but I want to get through now. So, my point on value is it goes vision, there's solutions, and you deliver regularly. And when you deliver regularly, you're able to evaluate regularly. You're able to evaluate how long did it take. Because if you're delivering value regularly, you've got the same team. Well, that's a bit of a start in terms of estimating. And you've got their estimate of how long this team took to do this piece of work and how much this piece of work cost. Critically also, you can look at the quality. When they deliver the toilet, you can go and say, oh, actually, I don't think you did a very good job there. And actually, I didn't like the way that you worked with me. So you've got an opportunity by delivering value regularly to calibrate how it's going. these are the mighty All Blacks. Any Kiwis in? There's one Kiwi. Fantastic. I don't fancy English chances much on. We made them angry last year, and that wasn't a good idea. This is just finishing on leadership and how important leadership is. The All Blacks are the most successful international sports team of all time, bar none. Rugby's quite a complex game. It's got lots of different situations in it. The leader is not always present. It was the All Blacks that invented the idea of leaders all over the park. So they have lots of leaders in their team. So it's similar on a project. So people are told, Baldy Bob in the corner that's always moaning actually has a point of view. He's potentially a leader in waiting. He influences the other people around him. And one of the things we can do on our projects is to enlist these people to help us deliver it. Right, so I'm going to finish with 3 practical things that you can do tomorrow on your projects. I've written them down so I don't forget them. This is my book, by the way. It's real. It's a hardback. There's some leaflets here, give you 35% discount off it. It was published by Gower in September. So, 3 practical things. So, first of all, remember the 3 words. Psychology, leadership, value. And look at your project through those lenses. Psychology, look at your project when you go back into the office and say, are we being over-optimistic? Now, how do we validate that we're being over-optimistic? Look for disconfirming evidence. So instead of looking for evidence that confirms your view, look for evidence that disconfirms your view. Leadership, it's only too late to get a clear vision when all the money is spent. If you can't walk around the project and talk to people and they've got a clear vision, then it's not been communicated well. You haven't given them a true north. And finally, the last one I did there was something that anybody can do really quickly, which is to say, what are the fundamental business case assumptions? Have we validated them? And if we haven't validated them, when are we going to validate them? And I think I'm 40 seconds over, Vic. Sorry. So Vic is going to go on to talk about benefits and structuring of benefits using Polaris.
Indeed.